Welcome to February's tea brewing tips video. Last month we talked about the differences in approach between bowl tea and gongfu tea, and how bowl tea is more about ceremony and meditative space, and gongfu tea is more about skill and mastery and respecting tea by brewing it to its fullest potential. Now this month we're going to talk about the 5 basics of tea brewing, which actually apply to both kinds of tea brewing. They apply to all kinds of tea brewing. So no matter what approach you take to tea brewing, the 5 basics of tea brewing will help you to make a better cup or bowl of tea. The first basic of tea brewing is to divide your tea space in half and do everything on the right side with the right hand and everything on the left side with the left hand. This is really important for a lot of reasons. One reason is that we want to be centered onto the tea space, and we want to involve all of our body. We do things often in a very imbalanced way, and tea practice can help us to be a much more balanced person. Most people, especially righties, we are up to many fold stronger with our right side than we are with our left. We do almost nothing with the offhand. So we're often very off balance in our body, in that one arm is much stronger than the other ones. Using both hands, this hand to control this side and this hand to control this side, helps us to stay centered and to utilize all of our body and be balanced. In traditional Asian society, it's rude to turn your back to your guests. So when I'm reaching over to this side of the table, I'm turning my back to my guests over here. And when I'm reaching over to this side of the table, I'm turning my back to my guests over there. The energy of staying centered onto the tea space will become more and more important as you progress, especially in gongfu tea. Now, the other reason why this is really important, in 20-some years of tea brewing, the #1 reason that I have seen teaware get broken or knocked over, and luckily not broken, is reaching across the table with the opposite hand. Because when I reach across the table like this, look where the teapot is, and come whack, right on the way back, something gets knocked over, whether it's a cup or a pitcher or a teapot. So we don't want to reach across this line. So we're going to divide the space in half, and we're going to do everything on the right side with our right hand and everything on the left side with our left hand. This will mean sometimes passing things to yourself from the center. This is in every tea tradition in the world, from Chinese to Japanese to Korean to everything. In the Japanese tea ceremony, for example, you'll see that they open the door by taking it halfway with the left hand and then the rest of the way with the right hand. So they bring it to the center with one hand and then grab it with the other hand and finish it. So they don't cross that line. In tea, there are a lot of circular movements. There's the pouring of the kettle, the decanting of the tea into the cups. There are a lot of circular movements. All the circular movements on the right hand should be counterclockwise, and all the circular movements on the left hand should be clockwise. An easier way to remember this is that they go towards the center. Now, the more we progress into gongfu tea, you will begin to see that so much of tea brewing is about utilizing the body's natural force. If the movements are slow and gentle and graceful, it will definitely improve the tea, whether it's bowl tea or gongfu tea. So we want to use as little force in our body as possible. The reason that the right hand and the left hand circle inwards is to do with the makeup of our bodies. Circling outwards doesn't work. My elbows clack against my body. It's awkward. You should try it at home. As you're watching this video, I know it might sound cheesy right now, but I want you to stick out your hands and try swinging them towards the center. Come on, do it with me. And then swing them out this way. You give it a try. And you can see this is awkward. My elbows hit against my body. But we don't brew tea that way. This is so much more fluid. You can feel it right away. You can feel it in your body. I hope you're trying. The third basic of tea brewing is to put the kettle in the offhand. This is very important, and it will become more and more important as time goes on, especially as you begin to brew gongfu tea. So this means if you're right-handed, you want the kettle on the left side. If you're left-handed, you want the kettle on the right side. Now, many of you will have already made a habit of putting the kettle in your strong hand. It's only natural to start that way. I myself did. But I'm going to try and save you a lot of trouble here, which is to break that habit as soon as possible. And the more you make a habit of using the strong hand for the kettle, the more difficult it'll be to break that habit when you yourself realize how important it is to have it in the offhand. And I myself realized that as time went on, experientially, not just because people taught it to me, but because I understood myself that I wanted the kettle in the offhand, and it was a little bit more difficult to do because I had made a habit of using my strong hand. There are many good reasons to have the kettle in the offhand. The first is one that we've already spoken about, which is balance and ambidexterity, using both sides of the body. Now, having the kettle in the offhand, which is the heaviest element in tea preparation, this is the heaviest element, strengthens my offhand. Our offhand is weaker than our strong hand. So by using the offhand to hold and manipulate with precision the heaviest element in tea brewing, we're strengthening our weakest side. We're bringing them up to balance. More ambidexterity in daily life will apply to all kinds of things, from cooking to the way that you even open doors or grab things. And you'll see that it also brings with it more mindfulness, more attention to detail, and you're present onto more of your life in that way. But actually, bringing balance to both sides of the body is really a minor reason for having the kettle in the offhand. A much more important reason has to do with an aesthetic of all Eastern art, which is yi qi he chang, which means finished in one breath. But qi actually also means energy, so it's like finished in one energy, finished in one flow, finished without hesitation. In all arts, from theater to music, even athletics, a master knows that hesitation makes all the difference in the world. If a musician's on stage and they forget a note, they play the next one. Or if they mistake a note, they just move on, and you hardly notice because they just roll with the flow. There has to be no hesitation for an art to really reach culmination. And as you progress in tea, whether it be bowl tea or gongfu tea, but especially gongfu tea, you will find that this is very, very important. In gongfu tea, the smoothness of the brewing is incredibly relevant. So it's very important that the tea flow very, very, very smoothly. And you can actually see this when you're brewing and you're doing everything with a strong hand, the kettle, the pot, it looks like a clunky car, like puttering around. There's hesitation, there's staggering. You can see it. I grab this kettle here on my right side, and I bring it to the pot, and I fill up the pot, and now I have to set this down, either here or back over here. Let's set it back over here, and we have that pause, and now I pick up the pot, and I go to pour, like that. So if I have the kettle in my offhand, everything flows much more smoothly. It's one movement. You watch, as I pick up the kettle, I can fill my pot, and I can then pick up the pot in the same movement, and nothing stops. You see? So everything flows together. You can actually see it. If I'm pouring with this hand, and then I pick this up, and then I pour into the cups, and then I'm handing the cups out, everything is happening in one movement. One movement. Boom, boom. This is one flow, right? Where this one finishes, this one picks off, right? It's like handing a baton to the other hand. It's like handing something from the left hand to the right hand. The process never stops. There's never a staggering. There's never a hesitation. This just comes and this flows. And that will be very important, especially with teas that need to be steeped to a very precise time. Like the first few steepings of a lightly oxidized oolong tea, for example. So if fluency and smoothness are important to your tea brewing, then having the kettle in the offhand is also very important. So the fourth and the fifth basics of tea brewing move internal. They move to the state of mind behind the tea brewing, which is actually the most important aspect of tea brewing. More important than teaware or brewing methodology is the mind of the one preparing the tea. A really powerful experiment to do is to have the same teaware, same tea, same water, and in the middle of the session switch brewers. And you'll be amazed at how different the tea is just by switching brewers, even though the teaware and the tea itself is the same. So the mind of the person brewing is very, very important. Now the fourth basic of tea brewing is slightly humorous because every time you have to say it with 10 evers. It's really important that you say that you never, ever, 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 ever pick up this kettle until your heart is still. Now that's 10 evers. So obviously that really emphasizes the importance of not picking up this kettle until your heart is stilled. Nothing good is going to come out of an unstable mind, heart. When we're off balance and we pick this up to start the brewing process, we're starting everything from an unstable place, from an unstable mind, from an unstable heart. Actually, in traditional Chinese society, it was considered rude, even amongst businessmen. or scholars sitting around having casual conversation. It was considered rude to talk over tea while one was steeping because it was felt that then the words that you were saying would get into the tea. So even businessmen traditionally who were sitting and having tea and having a conversation about some business that they had would take pauses in their conversation when the person who was preparing the tea was actually preparing the tea, because it was considered slightly rude to speak over the tea. But also because you have to concentrate on what you're doing. If you're not concentrating and you're not focused and your heart isn't still, then what results will not come from that still place, and it will not lead to that stillness for those that drink your tea. So we want to brew tea out of the stillness. We want to brew tea out of the calm space in the center of our heart. The time when the kettle is boiling has always been a time for meditation. There's so many poems all throughout history that talk about the wind soughing the pines brought me back from my meditation. And the wind soughing the pines is a poetic way of saying that the water started boiling. They thought that the water boiling from a metal kettle especially sounded like the wind soughing the pines. And it brought me back from my meditation. It means I was meditating and it became time to serve tea because the water reached a boil. So before you start pouring, before you start this process, still yourself. Still yourself. Now, I know I said never with 10 evers, but don't make your guests sit there for 3 hours without any tea, and then they ask, hey, where's the tea? And you say, well, my teacher said I couldn't never with 10 evers pick up the kettle until my heart's still, and my heart's still not still, so I guess no tea today. The idea is just to still your heart as much as possible before you pick this up. Now, there's many ways you could do this. You could say a mantra, you could shake some fairy dust above your head, or do a little dance with a feather. It doesn't really matter. For me, the best way is always just breath. So if I find any instability in my body or in my heart or my soul, any part of my heart mind is unstable or not at peace, I'll take a moment and take a few breaths and calm down. I also like to put one hand on the kettle and one hand on the pot, because especially after the first steeping, the water and tea have already met each other. They already know each other. They're already connected. And so they can connect through me. And if I'm calm and sensitive and open, I can feel that channel flowing through me, and I can feel if that channel is very, very clean, or if any of me is blocking the way. Because so much of tea brewing is about getting out of the way, letting the tea prepare itself, letting it flow naturally, letting it come out the way that it wants to come out. This is really important, because then you become a very natural part of tea's journey from seed to cup. The final basic of tea brewing extends out of the fourth one. So I still my heart before I pick up the kettle, never and 10 evers, remember. So now I need to stay with the tea. It does no good for me to still my heart, for me to take some breaths, to connect the pot and the kettle, to slow down and calm down, and then pick up the kettle and start talking. If I do that, then I upset the stillness that I just created by taking a moment's pause before I picked up the kettle. I don't want to do that. I don't want to take the time to still my heart and remove all the obstructions from my heart and then start the process and lose that stillness. So in order to maintain that stillness that I've just created by calming myself, by breathing or doing some other kind of meditation or mantra or visualization or whatever it is that you do, just take some breaths. It can be that simple. It doesn't have to be something spiritual and woo-woo. You just take some breaths, calm down, be still, be focused, be ready. Now we want to continue that focus. We want to continue that attention. We want to continue that one-pointedness of mind, that samadhi, through the entire brewing process. So we created a sense of peace and calmness, and now we want to carry it forward into the brewing. That's really important. So the way that we phrase that is stay with the tea. Don't let go of the tea. And when I say stay with the tea and don't let go of the tea, I mean your consciousness, your focus, your concentration should be fully on the tea. So you've calmed down and you've stilled the mind before you pick up the kettle, and now you pick up the kettle and you're going to stay with the tea. You're going to stay with the tea as you pour the water into the pot with all your focus and all your concentration. You're going to stay with the tea, and then you're going to stay with the tea as you decant the tea into the bowls or into the cup, or whatever it is, whether it's bowl tea or gongfu tea. You're going to stay with completely focused onto the tea and stay right there with all of your attention, all of your focus, not one drop missing, and then you're going to hand the bowl to your guests, and at this point, I can let go. But from the moment I pick up the kettle until the moment I hand my guests the bowl, I'm not going to break even a hair of concentration, so that I've stilled my mind And then I'm going to carry that stillness through in the tea brewing, and I'm not going to let go of the tea at all. The shogun Hideyoshi said of Tea Master Rikyo that his tea brewing was just like a great swordsman. There was nowhere to penetrate. And that's part of what this means, that his concentration was so whole and so complete that there was not a place to break it or to enter. No disturbance could break his concentration because his concentration was that one-pointed. So let's review the 5 basics of tea brewing. Number 1, divide the space in half and do everything on the right side with your right hand and everything on the left side with your left hand. Number 2, all circular movements are towards the center. Number 3, we want the kettle to be in our offhand. Number 4, never and 10 evers pick up the kettle until your heart is still and at ease and free from obstructions. And number 5, stay with the tea. As soon as you start pouring, use all your concentration and focus to stay with the tea. And I think you'll find that these 5 basics of tea brewing will improve all your tea no matter how you prepare it. Whether you prepare bowl tea or gongfu tea or use a different approach altogether, these 5 basics of tea will help you to not only improve the tea that you serve to your guests, but also to cultivate yourself. And you'll begin to see that they have an impact not just on your tea brewing, but on other areas of your life as well. Thank you for joining us for this month's Tea Brewing Tips video. We hope that these videos help you to make better tea from month to month, and that your guests leave transformed, and that they go share tea with their own friends, family, and loved ones. And like that, love is changing the world bowl by bowl.